What's up, everybody? Welcome to the very first poker vlog for the Joker Poker YouTube channel. My name's Justin, and in today's session, I'm playing 1-3 No Limit Texas Hold'em at Resorts World Las Vegas. And without further ado, let's jump into the action. It's a sunny day outside in Las Vegas, but not quite hot enough to hit the pools. That's okay with me though, because the action should be heating up in the poker room, being that it's the first round of March Madness. The first notable hand I'm dealt is Ace-King offsuit in the hijack. There's a middle position limper of $3. $3 is not going to be enough for me though. I raised to $12 with a premium hand. The cutoff player calls the $12. The button player calls the $12. The blinds fold to the original limper, who also calls the $12. It's important when you're heading into any flop to have a game plan in mind for what flops hit your exact hand in your range of possible hands that you can have, as well as your opponents. So when the flop comes 10-5 deuce rainbow and the original limper checks it to me, it's pretty much a brick for everyone involved in this hand. So I go ahead and bet $35. Now, the range of hands that I'm representing with this bet is pocket jacks plus. Being that I'm the original raiser, this board is going to favor the range of hands that I could have more than my opponents, and they all fold. The next notable hand I'm dealt is King 9 of clubs in the cutoff. I open the action to $10. It's folded to the big blind, who then decides to raise to $25. $25 is a cheap enough raise for me to call with this type of speculative hand. So now I'm going heads up to this flop, hoping to see some clubs, and the dealer does put out a couple of clubs with a flop of queen of clubs, 4 clubs, 5 of hearts. The big blind decides to bet $15, and $15 is cheap enough for me to call and see a turn card, which comes the 8 of spades. The action checks through on the turn, and I just figured I might as well just realize my equity if my opponent's going to let me get there cheap enough. So unfortunately though, the river card comes the queen of hearts, and unfortunately there's nothing I can do here with king high except for fold when my opponent bets $40 into me. This hand I decide to put on the under the gun straddle, and I am dealt 6-7 offsuit. Not a great hand by any means, so the action folds to a middle position player who tries to just call $3, but the dealer has to remind him that it's a straddle, so he has to put $6 into the pot now, which he wasn't really that big of a fan of. And the blinds call the $6, and I decide to check my option, being that my hand is not that great. So we are heading 4 ways to a flop of 5 king 5 rainbow. The action checks to the original limper, who decides to bet $15. Now, being that he wasn't really that interested in the hand pre-flop when he thought he could just limp for $3, this $15 bet doesn't really symbolize strength to me. And being that I could have just about any hand, being that I checked my option, I go ahead and raise to $35, and the original limper asks the dealer for a count and decides to fold. That makes me 2 for 2 on my bluffs so far today. Always a good feeling when you're able to get those bluffs through, but this hand in the Lojack, I'm dealt pocket kings, which is definitely not a bluffing type of hand, especially when you get a maniac and under the gun who limps in for $3. He's played just about every single hand known to mankind, and he's already bought in for 2 bullets. So when he limps, I raise to 20. The big blind calls the 20, and so too does the under the gun limper. So now we are going 3 ways to a flop of 8-6-4 rainbow. God, not a good flop for pocket kings. Definitely connects with a limping type of range. The big blind checks it to the under the gun player. Under the gun bets 70. So now it's on me, and I'm putting him either on 2 pair or a straight draw. So I go ahead and call the 70 just to evaluate the turn card and see what happens from there. but the big blind also calls the 70. So now we are going 3 ways still to an interesting turn card of the Ace of Diamonds. The original limper jams for $22 all in. I raised to $45, and it's kind of a Bob Ross happy accident because the big blind decides to go all in, which makes me have to snap fold, and now it's heads up between the big blind and the maniac under the gun player to a river card of another 8. The original maniac limper shows 6-4 for bottom 2 pair, which is counterfeited on the river by his opponent's ace king. I should have said this at the start of the video, but I bought into this game for the max buy-in of $400. I was down around $300 after that hand and decided to reload my stack back up to the max buy-in of $400. So I was originally in for $400. Now I'm in for $700. This hand I'm dealt ace-10 offsuit under the gun, and I make a loose open to $10. The under the gun 2 player calls my $10. The small blind 3 bets to $35. The big blind calls the $35, which incentivizes me and the under the gun 2 player to also call the $35. So now we're heading 4 ways to a flop of ace-10-7 rainbow. What a heck of a flop after being stuck $300. Now I've got top 2 pair, and the blinds check it to me, so I decide to check it to the under the gun 2 player to see if he'll take a stab at it, but he also checks. The turn card is the 3 of hearts. The blinds check it to me again, and there is no more checking to be done for me, so I go ahead and bet $45, a little bit over a third of the pot. The under the gun 2 player folds, and the other 2 players fold as well, so didn't get any callers when we had a monster hand, but you know, I'll take a win after being stuck. This next hand is a strange one, to say the least. Definitely one of those ones where you have to get it on camera to believe it, and luckily I'm playing on camera today, so I am dealt Jack-10 offsuit on the button. There's an under the gun open to $10. A middle position player calls the $10, and for me, I'm on the button here. I decided to make a loose call and see a flop. And the big blind player also calls the $10. So now we're heading 4 ways to a flop here, and it's actually a pretty decent flop with the Jack of clubs, 6 of spades, 7 of clubs. So flop top pair here. The action checks to me. I bet $20, and only the big blind calls the $20. So now we are going heads up to a turn card of the 10 of diamonds. Wow, feels pretty good to turn 2 pair after flopping 2 pair that last hand. My fortunes are definitely changing this session, and the big blind player decides to lead into me for $25, and I called the $25 bet. Definitely could be putting in a raise, but for whatever reason this hand I call. So we are going to a river card of the Queen of Spades. My opponent decides to stack up a bunch of chips, put them in the middle. I just snap call. I don't even ask the dealer for a count. And my opponent tables 3 deuce of clubs. He thought he flopped a flush, but unfortunately for him, he did not, and I win a pretty good sized pot. The tables are starting to turn this session. I'm starting to get some good cards, some good runouts, and there's not a better hand to get dealt in this game than pocket aces and under the gun +1. There's an under the gun limper for $3. I raised to $15. Under the gun 2 calls the $15. Gets over to the big blind, who also calls the 15. Now it's on the original limper, who also decides to call $15. We're going 4 ways to this flop, and it's always not optimal with big pocket pairs to be going multi-way because they always play much better heads up, but alas, we are going 4 ways to a flop of 5 of hearts, 6 of hearts, 10 of clubs. Definitely favors a limping range again, so the big blind player bets 20. The under the gun limper calls the 20. I call the 20, and so too does under the gun +2.
So now we are still 4 ways here, and we get ourselves an interesting turn card, which is the Jack of Clubs. So it puts a lot of straight draws on the board, puts a lot of flush draws on the board. So when the action checks to me, it's time for me to turn up the heat and bet $100 to charge those draws. The Under the Gun 2 player thinks about it for a few seconds, but he decides on a fold. The big blind player snap folds. Now it's on the original limper. Now, like I said, this flop connects with the limping range, and also the turn card can connect with the limper's range. But he thinks about it for a moment and decides on a fold, so you can't complain when the chips get pushed in your direction. Always feels nice when you're running well. You get pocket aces in that last hand, and bam, all of a sudden, I'm dealt pocket kings here in the hijack. There's a Lojack limper for $3. I decide to raise to $12. Might be a little bit too small because the big blind player calls, and so too does the original limper. Like I said before, it does not favor pocket pairs when you're going multi-way, but sometimes in 1-3, people are just going to call because they're just trying to have some fun, which there's nothing wrong with that at all. So we are going 3 ways to a dangerous flop of 10-8-9 rainbow. The limper checks it to me. I check it to the button player, who decides on a bet of $15. The original limper decides to fold, and I decide on a call. So I'm just going to evaluate the turn card and go from there. Now, heads up to the turn of the 3 of spades. I check it over to the button, who decides to check back. The river card is a 6 of hearts, so puts a 4-liner to the straight. I check it to the button player, who decides to check it back. I show my pocket kings, and they're good against his pocket jacks. I could have played that hand a little more aggressively, but those cards definitely favor a big blind calling range. A considerable amount of time passes after that hand, and I'm just bleeding chips, having to fold on the flop because I'm not hitting a set or not picking up any equity, etc. Until I'm dealt ace-queen offsuit in the hijack. There's a middle position limper that makes it 11. I decide to just call the 11. I definitely could be putting in a raise to $40 here, but for some reason this hand I decided to call. The cutoff player also decides on a call. So now we are heading 3 ways to a flop of queen of diamonds, 9 of clubs, 4 of hearts. So I flop top pair, top kicker on this board. The middle position player decides to bet $15. I decide to call 15, and so too does the cutoff. So now we are still 3 ways to a turn card that brings the 7 of hearts. The middle position player this time decides to slow down and check. With my top pair, top kicker here, I am not going to be slowing down anytime soon, so I decide on a bet of $45, a little bit over half of the size of the pot. The cutoff player doesn't think too long, and he decides on a call. Now it's back on the middle position player, who decides on a fold. So now I'm going heads up to a river card that brings the deuce of hearts. This brings in the backdoor flush, but I'm not all too concerned about that. I decided to bet $50 here and go for some thin value. The cutoff player decides to call the $50. I turn over ace queen for top pair, top kicker. Turns out he also has that same hand, so we ended up chopping this pot. This next hand, you could say I make a few mistakes. I'm dealt pocket jacks on the button. There is an under the gun 2 limper for $3. The middle position player decides to raise to 11, and for some reason I decide to call the $11. Here I should be raising to 40, but for whatever reason I decide to just call 11. It gets back to the original limper, who also calls. So now we're going 3 ways to a flop of the ace of spades, 7 of hearts, 10 of hearts. The action checks to me, and I bet $15. Now, given the size of the pot here, I should be betting more than just $15 if I'm trying to turn my hand into a bluff or something. Can't really tell you what I was thinking in this moment, but we're all human. We make mistakes, etc. The turn card now brings the 4 of clubs. We're still 3 ways. The action checks through. The river card brings the king of hearts. The under the gun 2 player bets $25. Middle position player folds. I decide to raise this hand to $65. I decided to turn the jacks into a bluff. The under the gun 2 player calls the $65. He has a pair of aces with ace deuce offsuit, and he's going to take it down. So I go back to bricking a bunch of flops until I am dealt the last notable hand of the session, which is 10-9 offsuit in the cutoff. The action folds to me, and I decide to make a loose open here to $10. Only the big blind calls the $10, so we are going heads up to a flop of ace of hearts, 5 of clubs, 8 of spades. The big blind checks it to me, and he's the tightest player at the table. So I decide to bet $15 to try to get him to fold on the flop. Well, $15 is not going to do the trick. He calls $15. The turn card is the ace of spades. The big blind checks it to me again. This time I'm going to bet $25. He thinks about it for a little bit and decides to make a call. So still heads up to a river card of the king of hearts. The big blind checks it to me again, and obviously with just 10 high, I am not going to win this hand, so I got to think of a sizing here that's going to put enough pressure on the big blind to fold. So I decide to bet $60, just trying to represent a big hand, such as ace queen, ace jack, etc. for trips. And he is thinking about this for a while, and all I'm thinking is, man, just fold and let me get this pot. And eventually he does make a fold, so we get a successful triple barrel bluff through. After that successful bluff, I start bricking some more flops, and I decide, you know what, it's just time to rack up and leave. And I'm into this game for $700, out of the game for $700, which is a break-even session. I'm still getting used to playing on camera, and I promise you for the next video I will have a much better camera angle and take better notes on these hands so that way I'm able to convey my thoughts in a more clear, concise manner. But overall, it was a fun game to play in, and the staff at Resorts World is very friendly, so I can't wait to put out some more content for you guys in the future.
That wraps it up for the first poker vlog of the YouTube channel. If you guys see areas where I can improve, write it down in the comments section. And if you like this content, feel free to subscribe because there's going to be more poker vlogs coming out in the future as well as basic strategy videos. Thank you for watching the video and have a great day.